Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. Because this is Airwindows SmoothEQ. So here's the deal. I got busy working on my filters and things because I wasn't entirely happy with where things stood with AngleEQ. Like, it's very neat. I'm told that it can actually sound kind of like a cab simulation or whatever, and that's because it is ruthlessly unnatural and mutates the sound very, very radically. And that's not actually what I wanted to do. The whole thing was based on the idea of trying to do what I call subtractive EQs, where I'm using things like filtering a thing and then subtracting that from the dry signal so that I can have the high frequency version. And if you add them together, you get exactly the same input. And it wouldn't do that. So hopefully you had some fun playing with it. It has its place. But here's what you can do with Airwindows SmoothEQ. You can play this. And let's just say there's too many highs. Well, we can make those go right away, or boost them a whole bunch. Just a lot of stuff like that. What I did to start it off was take mids out. You can take mids out a whole bunch. Because the thing with SmoothEQ is I've hit upon the way of using that subtractive EQ where it adds up to perfectly ultimate fidelity sound, where it's literally exactly the same as what you sent in, but with steep crossovers. And what you're hearing is steep crossovers. You see they're down in the bottom here, X over H and X over L. So you can make them very high, very low. It gives you a pretty wide range of control over things. And then you can just have it back again. Because it is that subtractive thing where no matter what you do with it, flat is always flat. In fact, flat with everything padded a little bit is still flat. And they also give a full range of adjustment. For instance, if I drop the lows down here, that high filter is able to sweep down into the lows, and the low filter is able to sweep up into, it's made out of the mid-range, so the crossover between the high and the mid-range does affect what the low is able to do, but they all add up to flat when you finish with them. And so you can throw on, for instance, drums. That can be completely flat, or I can take the mids out and we can play with the crossovers here. Until it's only the frequency extremes. And then you can have a sort of air EQ or subs EQ, where what we can do is, since the lows were dialed down to the extreme subsonics, we can sweep that up and bring in only the deepest of lows without changing anything else. And it's a very steep filter, although it's not the steepest filter that I could get in this configuration. That's because, here we'll go, we got a fairly substantial boost going on here. While we're at it, we can have our air band there, or we can bring it down a bit. and then dries like this. See, it's maintaining the basic sound of the mid-range really effectively because of this subtractive thing I was talking about. And the way I'm doing it is I worked out that the way I'm stacking up these crossover filters, which is the same way I do isolator, which I was never able to make into a crossover filter in quite this way before. I'm doing essentially the same thing except for using a Bessel filter instead of the Butterworth filter so that it will have smoother crossovers that are still extremely tight. And the way I'm making that happen is they stack in order to make a steeper filter, but every step of the way I'm returning it to the subtractive mode and putting the raw sound back together again and then dividing it up with a different set of, in the case of the Bessel filters, it's different sets of frequencies and different sets of resonances, which are going to combine to make a unified filter that's a lot steeper but still works the same. And the end result is like this. It's really sharp, but they still add back up to completely flat, even though this is an extremely aggressive filtration. It goes back to perfectly and utterly flat. And we can do the same thing with a guitar, for instance. Let's just say we want to dial in the highs by bringing them a little bit quieter. Well, we can just cut them completely. Oh, wait, I had it in dry. But I don't have to have it on dry. I can fire it. That's the challenge with a plugin where the flat setting is literally identical to dry, is you have to remember when you've got it turned on. Here is it turned on. And you probably can't hear anything with the high because we've got the crossover set really high. But listen to this. We can dial it right down like it's an isolator filter. Tie it in real neatly like that. We can also bring back, dial in the lows too. Oh, that's boosting them though. And we can bring the lows to be much quieter like that. Or boost them a lot as well. That is Airwindows SmoothEQ. And that's what I was hoping I'd be able to do when I did AngleEQ, which turns out to be something completely and utterly different. So why not have both? My idea with SmoothEQ, this should be the thing that I can use for Console O, the orchestral version, perhaps an even gentler one that doesn't have that kind of steepness of cutoff. Although bear in mind, all you got to do is have it set to flat and then make the tiniest little adjustment. Barely matters how steep it is. You're not going to hear any artifacts from it because if you're doing only a subtle correction, any artifacts it produces are also going to be just as subtle because of the way that it works. And I'm contemplating making an even steeper edged version for Console H and figuring out to what extent do I want to include things like the crossovers that are built into this one, which is worth asking. Like when I do make Console H, do you want me to devote a couple of controls to the crossover filter or leave it as just a fixed filter? Because that's what I'm thinking about doing for things like if I was to do a console TR, your classic Trident A-range kind of thing, which wouldn't be necessarily an exact cloning of it. What it would be is, let's make a 4-band that sounds amazing. A 4-band EQ, probably with fixed controls, just so that you grab and go, that you set up your thing and make it work, and have the summing act like the Trident summing as heard on records. This is the technology that I would need to use in order to make a plugin like that. And right now, what you can have is SmoothEQ, because this is up and fully running. I hope you like it. I feel like perhaps mastering people, some of my professional friends, might find this one happy because it's less of a crazy experiment. It's honestly not in the least a crazy experiment. What it is an experiment with something that I don't think people normally do. I don't think people normally resum subtractive EQ bands back to the original signal again between each step of multiple pole filters. And the reason I don't think people normally do that is I think people who design these things usually assume, oh, I'll just make this filter, and I'll make the one where this is the high band, so I make a biquad high pass and make it as steep as I want, and there we go, I've got that. And then I'll make a mid band, and I'll make it as steep as I want, and I'll do that. And then I'll make the bass band, and so on. And they'll be doing them as individual things, assuming that if I do the math correctly, it's going to be perfect, and I don't trust that line of thinking. So I'm doing it in a perhaps more cumbersome way, but I think it's really going to pay off. And the neat thing is it's still with just biquad filters. This is with normal signal processing stuff. I'm just arranging it in something of a different way. I'm going to do things like that with householder reverbs as well. The reverb work is going pretty good. And I'll get back to work. This is a weird time in history, and as a little Vermonter living in the United States and making free stuff, it's like, well, what I do doesn't have to be stepped on as long as I survive and continue doing it. And that's up to me. I choose to try to survive and continue doing this. And that's why I have the Patreon. But if you're in big trouble, you can drop off. I promise I'll tell people if I'm in big trouble. And I'll get back to work. I'm working to make free stuff that people can download and use in their music. No matter who you are, no exceptions. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.